Hi everyone, my name is Hannah V. I'm a producer, a pianist, a keyboard player, and a songwriter. So I got into music as a child. I was classically trained. So between the ages of 9 to 12, I played classical, started getting to the competing age, and then became a teenager. And my piano lessons were on a Friday night. And so I was like, allow that, it's not gonna happen. And so gave it all up. But I went to an American high school in Berlin, which had an amazing music department. And one of my teachers kind of gave me a couple of jazz recordings, Miles Davis, Coltrane, and I listened to them and I was like, okay, I want to get back into music and I want to do this. So I got heavily into jazz as a teenager. And I was very lucky that a lot of my schoolmates were into music as well and were into jazz as well. I think it really helps having other people to play with. And, you know, we did gigs for our parents, you know, like, so they were obviously not real gigs and we probably sounded pretty rubbish, but you get used to performing. And again, because of my classical upbringing, back then, not anymore, I could sight read anything. So I'd be asked to play for any choir accompanying, you know, be it classical, be it jazz, be it whatever it was. So I really was playing all the time, every day. Sundays I'd play in church. It was a no-brainer that I would go into music professionally. And initially I wanted to be a jazz pianist. And I mean, only a pianist. So classic trio, like I didn't care about synths or even the Rose or Whirly. I didn't care anything about any of that. I was quite snobby. I was like, oh, Steinway or nothing. Came to the Royal Academy of Music to study jazz, which was really amazing. I met some of the best musicians. But it was also really scary because they were so good. But the one thing I noticed is that even though I'd so been into my jazz, I'd always listened to pop music. I was a child of MTV. I was always into my soul, my hip hop. And that became more and more apparent at the academy that as much as I was training to be a jazz pianist, that something in me was like, but I like hooks and I like beats. So I did a very basic one-year course at the academy on the jazz course on production. So that was my first introduction to sequencers on Logic. And I mean, it was really basic. But I remember that, you know, we had to kind of do a track and everyone else's tracks were kind of instrumental jazz tracks and mine was like a Janet Jackson sample chopped up. So I think I knew that I was always going to go left, I guess. Once I left the academy, I started gigging, bar gigs, hotel gigs, teaching gigs, kind of the kind of gigs you do when you don't have real gigs, and happened to fall into pop session keys playing. And that's where kind of my career really took off. My first gig was for Charlotte Church, and then I jumped on Gnarls Barkley, and then I jumped on Brian Ferry and Amphill. And, you know, the gigs started getting bigger and bigger. Anastasia, Sugar Babes, Rihanna, Jessie J, Jason Derulo, Jay Sean, Tayo Cruz. But the whole time I was producing, saved up housing benefit and got myself my first PC. And I don't know how I did my first beat, but it was a drum and bass track. I ended up playing with the Bugs in the Attic, who are an amazing collective of producers, Broken Beat, the originators of Broken Beat. And that's where something really switched in me. So these are 9 producers, and their music is just amazing, and it's super muso, but it's also very dance floor oriented. So I was on tour with them for about a year, 1.5 years, and they really took me under their wings. Their music is very breaks-based, and so they showed me how to recycle a break. I learned about all my analog synths. It's the first time. Kaidi Tatham, or Kaidi Cat, was the other keyboard player in the band, and he's just ridiculous. And so he was on an MS-20 or an ARP Axe, always on the roads. And so I really got to know the beauty of analogs, the beauty of keyboards, the beauty of programming. And so all of that knowledge that I learned, I just soaked it up and started doing weekly sessions at my house where every Tuesday I'd just basically stick a massive chicken in the oven and make like a curry roast, and totally random people would come over and record. I'd just have some mics set up and we'd just kind of hang around and record and drink and just have fun with it. Like sometimes I'd have a percussionist, but sometimes I have brass players, or sometimes I'd have a leather keyboard player. But then I kind of started getting more and more into house production. Released a couple of white labels, partnered up with a couple of other friends, and, you know, went through all the experiences that you go through as a young producer, working in studios where people steal your stems, or, you know, kind of fighting over £100 advance and like relationships falling out. Not realizing, you know, that all of that is so minimal, and getting your first contract and thinking you've made it, and like in your head buying a Mercedes or whatever, you know, like all the stupid things that we all have to go through as beginning musicians and beginning producers, basically just being gassed. So while I was doing this, the gigs started getting bigger, but it was hard writing on the road. I always took a little setup on the road, but the reality of it, for me anyways, is like when you're in tour bubble, it's just hard. It's as much as you want to set up your studio in a hotel room and record with the BVs, you just don't do it because you're tired, you're hyper, you're drinking a lot because that's just the road and everything's for free. And you don't have the motivation because it's so exhausting being on stage and all the traveling and all the early flights. But again, as the pop gigs got bigger, I started understanding so much more about production. So I'm sitting there and I've got, for example, Rihanna stems, and I'm listening to songs like Hard and I'm kind of analyzing them because I've got the stems. A lot of times the producers would come in and kick it, so Mark Ronson would come in rehearsal with Daniel Merriweather, an artist I was working with, and just play. And you kind of really see how people work. I had some Danger Mouse, for example, in the Gnarls Barkley rehearsals. He'd come in and he barely knew how to play a keyboard. I had to place his hands on the right notes. But in terms of his chopping and his sampling and his instinct for that was so amazing. And I really learned that, again, there's no rules to what makes you a producer. It's all about instinct and your gut feeling and utilizing your strengths. I decided to kind of do another drum and bass project and wrote an album where I wrote, I top-lined and produced everything. It was kind of an ambient drum and bass album, and it all featured one singer, my friend Joe Harrop. And I really worked hard on it, kind of worked on it for 3 years, kind of wanted to shop it around, started shopping it around, and then decided to kind of go a bit more pop. And again, this was my side hustle. I was never kind of thinking I'm going to quit the session game. I was just producing because I loved it on the side on my off time in between tours. And I ended up getting signed. So I got a record deal with Sony. And this was when kind of I had to give up the session stuff to really focus on being a producer. So I did my last tour was an arena tour with Jesse in the UK. And, I really savored every moment of it because I don't know when the next time is going to be. And then I kind of made the grand exit. I knew I had to do the production thing full time. Today what I want to do is talk you guys through my single It Ain't Right. So let's just get cracking. So when I first thought of the track, the way I write is I almost always have the concept in my head before I even put down my first chord. It's weird, but I just have an idea in my head, and I had an idea of contrasts because I like doing that a lot of my tracks anyways. I like having contrasting sections. I love having kind of really beautiful, nice piano parts, then all of a sudden interjected with hardcore beats because I believe that life goes like that, music, tension and release, light and dark, day and night. It's all about contrast, and I think that's what keeps it really exciting for me anyways. And I personally like listening to music where you go on a journey and then there's a really unexpected twist that just kind of wakes you up, because I feel all of us sometimes are just so complacent nowadays. And I try and bring those elements into my music as well. So with this track, I had a really strong idea of having a track that sounds like a dance track, feels like a dance track, and you expect a totally normal chorus, and then all of a sudden it switches and actually goes to a trap chorus with barely any vocals, hard drums, vocal samples and chops and all of that. I always use vocal chops. It's kind of an element I try and bring in all of my productions. So I started out with this part. It's my vocal. I think it was a song I was just demoing called So What, so I just chopped the so. By the way, I'm not a singer, so I just took the vocal, chopped it, tuned it, affected it, and started off with that. Then I kind of did a couple of piano chords, F minor, with an E flat in the bass. And then I just kind of moved my left hand, moved the root. So same voicing in the right hand, but what you actually end up getting is a D minor 7 flat 5 or a D half diminished. And then again, I just moved the root to a D flat with the same voicing in the right hand. What you end up getting is a D flat major 7. So I just thought, I love chromatic movement anyways, it's, again, you have your tension and you release them. So that was my verse section. Then for the build up into the drop, kind of stayed on the D flat major 7. Going to a B flat minor 9 and had the 9 kind of in my left hand as the melody note. to an F minor 7 with an added 9, to just a straight E flat major triad. So that whole section goes like this. So kind of quite moving chords, very beautiful chords, but then I thought that would contrast so nicely to the next section, the drop section, which is a straight up just your F root, you know? And the only movement you have is the octave in the 808. That's all that the bass does. And even with the brass line, you've got a very simple line. Very simple kind of pentatonic line. But again, it contrasts so nicely to your moving chords, to just bringing it back home to the root on your ones and patterns around the one. And then I knew that I wanted the rise to have your standard 4 on the floor clap. So again, I programmed all of this stuff at home, like with the most basic of sounds, because when I'm just doing ideas, I totally don't care about the sound, because it's not about that. For me, it's just getting it out, listening to my first instinct and working really fast. I'll always go in and, you know, really tweak sounds later, but initially it's just like getting the shape of it. So I knew I wanted to have that 4 on the floor clap section. I knew that I wanted that to sound like a chorus, even though it wasn't going to be the chorus. And then I knew that I wanted the contrasting section, well, to be something like this. With the 808s, clap and snare on 2 and 4. I also wanted to add a bit more pace to the sections further down the line. So we've got a nice marching snare. So these are the very basic elements. Also, what I added initially, so this is at home, was a nice kind of my main arpeggio. So that's a sound from Absinthe that I tweaked. And so I had all of those elements. So I had my piano, which I always had. I had my vocal chop. I had my arpeggio. I had the 4 on the floor clap in the build-up, and I had the drop, the switch, the beat switch. And with these elements in mind, I was like, okay, now I know what I want to do. Let me bring it to the studio. So brought it in here, sat down with Kors, who is my co-producer and co-writer on this one. And we kind of started working it up together. So I'll start again from the top now and run through all of the elements. Basically, what I try to do with this is look at it as 2 sounds. So you've got your dance section, which is, you know, your verse, your pre-chorus, your build-ups. And then with totally different sounds, you have the drop. So I knew that the build-ups and the dancey sections had to be super, super synth heavy. So the intro and the verse is very simple with just piano and arpeggio.
I'm no good this way, being on my own. I always run back to you. From the highest
Filtered kick.
Come the lowest.
Again, this was interesting, the reason I did this. Initially, I didn't have that in, but once I sent it to the label, they're kind of saying that radio don't like playing things that have too long of an acoustic section. So that's the reason I brought in the kick in earlier, which actually really works well.
It ain't right, but it's love, right, but it's love. And that's why
So you've got a kick and clap on your 4 and 4.
you take me right to the top, right to the top.
So let's just go over that section and go over a couple of the parts. This is so synth heavy, as in like pads over pads over pads over pads, but it just had to have that fatness, you know? So you've got the main arpeggio that you know already. Then you've got your main pads. And that wasn't sidechain, that's actually the other 4. Then the same sound, lower octave. Same sound, higher octave. So now you've got like really kind of just this massive wall of synths hitting you in the face. All of these are Nexus sounds, apart from the accent. Then I wanted an arpeggio in it. Again, movement is always nice. With this being so static, and the chords moving as they do, I knew that I wanted the piano to have some kind of melodic line. I'm a massive fan of hooks on hooks on hooks on hooks. As much as there needs to be a vocal hook, there needs to be a drum hook, there needs to be a piano hook, there need to be so many hooks. So I made sure I had this little melody in the piano. So really, again, for me, it's the contrast, isn't it? Beauty and the Beast. And I wanted a really beautiful piano part, which I think this is. So let's just have a listen to all of the instruments together. So this is only the keys, pianos, arps. Bass was just standard kind of root bass. So nothing, I didn't do any fancy movement. Initially I had like some showy-offy bits, but they were just clashing too much. The build-up needed to be simple and strong. So those are the synths. Let's quickly look at the drums in this section. So like I was saying, you have the main clap, 4 on the floor, but doubled with the kick as well. And some effects, crashes, sweeps. So the whole section with the vocals.
You take me right to the top, right to the top. I guess I just like what you got, like what you got.
And your standard build-up. Let's go through the drop. I love this section so much, like I still get really excited about it. So if I'm smirking, it's only because I'm happy. So like I said, we have the main vocal hook, your 2 and 4 clapper snare, nasty kick, cowbell, more cowbell. Some nice hats. My brother did some additional production on this, SV21, and he does a lot of my hat work because he's just amazing at that. Bass, 808 bass. So really, harmonically, the opposite of the sections before. No chords, no nothing, just like you're just on an F minor root, on an F root even, you know? Again, I'm really into ostinatos, so kind of repeated patterns. And I believe these kind of parts at either end, kind of low and high, either frequency end, they really tie in stuff really nicely. So on a lot of my tracks, I'll kind of, even if it's quite low in the mix, I'll have like a high string just on the octave, just to kind of do that, if you know what I mean. This sound was actually from my Virus. Then, this was when I was in the studio, I was just like, you know what? It needs brass, man. It needs kind of that hip-hop brass. So I had this part. So we've got this lush brass. And initially I was thinking, should I get some live bones in, some of my friends to do it live. But actually, the fact that it's synth, that is a synth brass, adds to it, adds to the griminess of it, the grittiness of it. So this is, again, another Nexus sound that was tweaked. So let me play you this whole section together. So you can really hear how integral the vocal chop is. It's the driving force. Now let me add all the harmonic parts, all the keys parts. So it's really driven by the 808s, driven by the vocal chop, and driven by the brass. Lots of fun effects. Lots of your alien sounds. Again, this is the kind of section where you can add all of that stuff in. You know, it's basically an instrumental, really. Even though there's vocal chops and stuff in there, there's no big sung chorus. I did cut in a bit of a vocal hook, so I chopped up the vocal. And then I just had this bit here. It was hard to get the mix of this part with the vocal chop, and I really had to work on the hierarchy of it, which is the vocal chop has to be higher. So you can probably tell that the like is panned. This was actually not something that I did, and this was something that I found quite interesting. It was mixed by Graham Archer, and he added kind of his own effects. It's called, you know, creative mixing. I'm very open-minded to people, third parties, or when it comes to the mix stage, people kind of saying like, what do you think of this or that? Because, you know, fresh ears always helps. So straight into verse 2.
There's a different way.
All the elements that you've had from before, except for this time, bass was added. But I wanted to spice up the piano a bit. I just gave it a tiny bit more movement. That's all the same. But then a bit of a melody. I like there to be progression in every section. So verse 2 is half the length of verse 1, so it's only a quick 4-bar. Straight into, again, the dance build-up. You can hear the crashes there. With the drop coming in now, but with the added element of the snare. So in this drop, another element that changes, apart from the snare, is that you get more hi-hat work, so faster hats. So 16s instead of 8s. I also added a high brass just towards the end of the phrase. That's the low brass. So you've just got, again, a bit more definition. Quite live sounding these are, so mixed with the synth brass. So a nice punch. So I'll play you guys kind of the second half of this drop now. So added elements are snare, hat, high brass. So the mid-8 is the pre. But I just asked the singer, who's Louise Labelle, I asked the singer to be a bit freer with it, make it a bit more emotional, make it more musical. Took out all the drums, just kind of had a breakdown. Added a couple more arpeggios. With another build-up. Again, you can hear how synth heavy it is with the final drop. So at this point for me, it ain't over yet. So you've got that drop there, which I didn't do, that was my brother. Details. For me, music is all about details. Just when you think it's over, there's another cool bit that gets added, or, you know, there's a little break, or there's something that gets added that just, it means that you've paid attention to the very last second of the song, and that's how I want to produce. It means that every track does take 50, 60 hours and it's long, but I'm really proud of the end product, you know? So I just wanted to throw in another little surprise right here. So, gotta love your triplets. It felt like the perfect timing, and I was dying to get this part in, of taking the brass and making the triplets. Again, it's like tension and release, and just when you don't expect it, like another bit that, you know, those bits that make you screw up your face, I live for those bits. So now we're really in the outro, so I thought it would be really nice to bring in a piano again, kind of to round it off and finish it off in the Hannah V way, which is with pianos, you know? So I brought in a nice Dr. Dre influenced and I made it messy on purpose. So kind of the rolls that you hear, kind of they're intentional. Because again, for me, it gave it a bit more life. So you've got the lead vox kind of singing the hook. And as you can hear, there's lots of BVs, lots of stacking. And you can hear the octave down. Again, that's just pitch shifted, not sung, just to give it, again, that effect. And you've got the high brass coming in all the time now. You've still got the snare, you've got the added piano. Another thing I added, and this was totally accidental, and I love when stuff like this happens, is I was in the studio and we were just jumping around, and chorus kind of just let out a... And I was like, I really like that. So I made him record it. And so let me just play you the outro. And there you have it. It ain't right. I wanted the vocals to be clean, to be quite concise, and to cut through. So Louise LaBelle, who's the vocalist, was the perfect choice. She's got a beautiful tone. She's got, you know, such a great pop vocal. Me and Kors wrote the top line, and her tone just fit over it so perfectly.
I'm no good this way, being on my own. I always run back to you.
Got that sweet tone. I'm very specific about my BVs. Again, that's just a thing, because I've been an accompanist all my life. So I like BVs. I like stacking stuff up.
It ain't right, but it's love, right, but it's love. And that's why I never stop, I never stop.
So you can hear there's a lot going on there.
Take me right to the top, right to the top.
And I like doing with vocals what I do with instruments too. I kind of like having like a really high one, but just low in the mix. But again, just the top and tail stuff, you know? Production is a frequency game, isn't it? It's like just to fill in all of the sonics in production and make you feel satiated. Is that even a word? I really liked the middle eight, where you can really hear Louise playing around with the melody a bit.
It ain't right, but it's love. And that's why I never stop. No, you take me right to the top. I guess I just like what you got.
So all of those little kind of little melismas and all of that, they wouldn't have come out enough in the verse, in the kind of main sections that are so drum heavy. But when something's a bit more stripped down, it's such a nice opportunity to feature the singer. And I'm very lucky that all of the singers I work with are just ridiculous, and I'm fans of their voices, and I like to showcase them, you know? So in terms of sound selection, all the drums, nothing is really stock sounds. So it's a combination of my drum sounds and of some of my brother's drum sounds. A lot of the synths, interestingly enough, because I like to work more with kind of hardware and like my virus and whatever, but a lot of the synths, like I said initially, came from Nexus. Pianos, I I always go for my native instruments, Alicia Keys. That's just my go-to piano if I don't have a chance to record a real piano. The main arpeggio pad, which is again a hook of the song, this thing. That was again a native instruments, absinthe sound. Pads, Nexus. The tiptoe sound. That's from the Virus. Brass. The main synth brass was from Nexus, but then I combined them with these more live-sounding brass, which were from IK Multimedia. Play that again without the tiptoe sound. And the vocal sample was just something I'd at some point somewhere recorded and treated. All the chops in the chorus, the vocal chops, they came from Louise's vocal that I just, I think I did the semitone thing. I think I just stuck the whole thing in Melodyne and just moved it around. Sometimes I span my samples over EXS24, or sometimes I stick them in my Machina, or sometimes I just stick them in Melodyne and move them around pitch-wise where I want to. So there's no right or wrong or one rule. It's just whatever the song calls for.
There's a different way.
You have this kind of idea of like, now I'm signed to a major, now I have to write hits. And working with a major label, it's amazing, but you also have a lot of opinions. And so you kind of, people are like, well, we need an international hit. And I was like, well, I don't know what that means. Like, okay, so everything has to be 140 BPM and above and higher than that. Everything has to have really big, high choruses, everything, you know, and it's really scary saying, no, actually, I'm gonna write what I want to write. But the second I found that confidence, the music became more me. I don't work with breaks as much as I used to, kind of program all the drums now. So beginning of this year, my EP got released, version 2.0, and that was kind of an introducing me to the world. And the next single, as you can hear, is out right now. And I'm just kind of honing my sound. Every time I get writer's block, I'm convinced that I've written my last good tune and that I'm never gonna write anything good and that I'm gonna get dropped. But I think every artist is exactly like that. And we have to be honest about it, because every third day I wake up feeling like a failure. But hey, welcome to the music game. But when it comes to people judging your own material, just stick to your guns and stick to your instinct, because you have to listen to that little voice that, you know, those ideas you have when you wake up in the morning, write them down. Those are the best ideas. The ones that come when you don't expect them, because that's the art right there. That one creative spark that can then lead to an amazing song. So really listen to that voice, that's my advice. So there you have it, guys, a track breakdown of my latest single, It Ain't Right. Thanks for tuning in, and you can follow me on my socials at Hannah V. Thank you.